Tom Anderson stared at the glowing message floating above his desk, reading it for the 10th time. The holographic seal of the Galactic Sports Council sparkled with an otherworldly shine, making the impossible words seem even more real. Earth had been invited to compete in the Galactic Olympics. After 50 years of space exploration and proving that humans could survive among the stars, this was their chance. Tom's hands shook slightly as he pressed the button to accept the transmission. As Earth's most successful Olympic coach, he knew this responsibility would fall to him, but the weight of it still made his heart race. They actually did it, he muttered, looking out his office window at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado. The morning sun caught the silver edges of the anti-gravity training pods that had become standard equipment after first contact. They're finally letting us compete. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Mary White, his assistant coach, rushed in. Her usually neat hair was messy, and her eyes were wide with excitement. "Tom, did you see it? The whole world's talking about nothing else." "I saw it," he nodded, gesturing to the hologram. "But something feels off." "Why now? Why are they suddenly so eager to have us compete?" Mary dropped into the chair across from his desk, her enthusiasm dampened slightly by his concern. "Does it matter? This is our chance to show the galaxy what humans can do." Tom zoomed in on the fine print of the invitation. His eyes narrowed as he read through the competition categories. "Look at this. They're letting us compete in everything. Swimming, running, jumping, strength events. When has any newcomer species ever been allowed to enter all categories?" "Maybe they're impressed by our progress," Mary suggested, but she didn't sound convinced. Before Tom could respond, his computer chimed with an incoming call. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Dr. James Cooper, Earth's leading xenobiologist. His expression was troubled. "Tom, we need to talk about this invitation," Dr. Cooper said without preamble. "I've been studying the participant list they sent over. Every single registered species has been part of the galactic community for at least 500 years. Most have biological enhancements that have been developing for millennia." Tom leaned forward. "What kind of enhancements?" "The kind that make our best athletes look like children in comparison. The Arcturians can control their bone density at will. The Proxima Centaurians can literally see in slow motion. And don't get me started on the Blue Crescent Alliance. They've won every major event for the past century." Mary stood up and began pacing. "So why invite us? We're basically showing up to a laser gun fight with stone spears." Tom brought up the historical records they had been given access to. As he scrolled through past competitions, a pattern emerged. Every few centuries, a new species would be invited to compete. They would perform poorly, often embarrassingly so, and their civilizations would frequently decline shortly after, choosing isolation over galactic integration. "It's a test," Tom said slowly, the realization dawning on him. "But not the kind they think it is." He stood up and walked to the wall display, bringing up images of Earth's top athletes. "They expect us to fail, to be humiliated, to realize we're not ready for the galactic stage." "What do we do?" Mary asked, her voice tight with concern. Tom smiled, and there was a glint of determination in his eyes. "We do what humans do best. We adapt. Get me a list of our most unconventional athletes, the ones who don't just break records, but break the rules of how things are supposed to be done. The ones who win not because they're the strongest or fastest, but because they think differently." Dr. Cooper's image flickered as he pulled up some files. "I'll send you my complete analysis of their biological capabilities. But Tom, these aliens, they're beyond anything we've prepared for." "Good," Tom said, already making notes. "Because they've never prepared for anything like us. Mary, call Washington. We're going to need special clearance for some of our more creative training methods." As his office burst into activity, Tom looked again at the invitation. The aliens thought they were setting up humanity for failure. Instead, they had just given humans exactly what they needed, a chance to prove everyone wrong. The game was on, and Earth was playing for keeps. The human team's spacecraft emerged from its final jump point, and there it was, Olympus Prime. The space station was massive, a spinning wheel of silver and light that made Earth's largest structures look like children's toys. Hundreds of ships from different worlds dotted the space around it, their designs as varied as the species that built them. Tom stood at the observation deck with his team of 20 athletes, watching as their ship approached the docking bay. None of them spoke. They were too busy taking in the sight of their first major step into galactic society. "Look at the size of that thing," whispered Bill, their top runner. His simple gray uniform matched the rest of the team's, a stark contrast to the shimmering, tech-enhanced outfits they could see other athletes wearing through the station's massive windows. The docking procedure went smoothly, and as the team walked through the arrival tunnel, they got their first real look at their competition. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the massive corridors. Some floated, others crawled, and a few seemed to teleport short distances. "Remember," Tom said quietly to his team, "act like you belong here." Because you do. A tall, blue-skinned alien approached them, its silver uniform marking it as part of the Blue Crescent Alliance. The defending champions. "Ah, the humans arrive at last," it said through a translator. "I am head coach Rex. We've been so looking forward to seeing Earth participate." Its smile didn't reach its eyes. "Thank you for the welcome," Tom replied politely. "We're excited to be here." As they were led to their quarters, Lisa Moore, their engineer, touched Tom's arm. "Coach," she whispered, "look at their equipment." Tom had already noticed. Every other team's athletes were wearing what looked like second skins of advanced technology. Some had visible implants, while others had limbs that clearly weren't original issue, all perfectly legal under the conveniently written rules. Their quarters were smaller than the other teams, tucked away in a far corner of the station. As soon as the door closed behind them, Mary turned to Tom. "Did you see Rex's face when he looked at our uniforms? Like we were wearing animal skins." "Let them think what they want," Tom replied, but his eyes were on the ceiling. He nodded to Lisa, who pulled out a small device and swept the room. She found 3 listening devices and 2 hidden cameras. They gathered in the training room, the one place guaranteed to be free of surveillance. Due to privacy regulations, the irony wasn't lost on them. "They're all enhanced," Bill said, pacing nervously. "I saw a runner's legs. They had some kind of liquid metal running through them." Tom nodded. "That's why we trained the way we did. They're expecting us to try to match them at their own game. We won't." Lisa pulled up a hologram of the station's layout. "I've been monitoring their systems since we arrived. The amount of data flowing through the competition areas is massive, way more than needed for just keeping score. They're not even trying to hide it," Mary added. "They think we're too primitive to notice." Tom gathered his team around. "Remember what we discussed. They've spent centuries perfecting their enhancements, making everything predictable, controllable. But they've forgotten something important." "What's that?" asked Anne, their gymnast. "The joy of pure competition, the thrill of not knowing what might happen." Tom smiled. "They've made themselves into machines, but we're still human, and that's our advantage." A loud chime echoed through the station, the call to the opening ceremony. As the team gathered their things, Tom took one last look around their modest quarters. "They think this is where humanity learns its place in the galaxy," he said quietly. "Let's show them exactly what that place is." The team walked out together, heads high, toward the ceremony that would start it all. They might not have enhanced muscles or quantum-assisted reflexes, but they had something better. They had nothing to lose and everything to prove. The first week of competition started badly for Team Earth. During the swimming events, Bill's goggles mysteriously filled with water mid-race. In weightlifting, the gravity controls malfunctioned, making the weights suddenly heavier. Even their drinking water tasted strange, though testing showed nothing wrong with it. Lisa sat in their training room, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from their failed events. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but she couldn't stop looking at the patterns emerging from the chaos. "Look at this," she called to Tom, who was reviewing videos of their athletes' performances. "Every time one of our people starts doing well, there's a spike in the station's power grid. Every single time." Tom walked over, his face serious. "Show me." Lisa pulled up multiple recordings. "Here's Anne's gymnastics routine. She was in first place until this moment." She pointed to a graph. "Power spike, and suddenly her balance beam feels slippery." She air-quoted the last word. "It could be coincidence," Tom said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Once is coincidence. Twice is suspicious. 15 times is a pattern." Lisa switched to another display. "And look at the Blue Crescent team's performance data. It's too perfect. Their results show exactly 2.3% improvement over their previous records, every single time." Mary burst into the room, holding her tablet. "You need to see this. I just got access to historical records from smaller competitions. Every new species that joined in the last 1,000 years had similar accidents during their first Olympics. Most of them never competed again." Tom's jaw tightened. "They're not just cheating. They're systematically pushing out newcomers." "But why?" asked Bill, who had been listening from the doorway. "Why invite us just to humiliate us?" "Politics," Mary answered. "Show the galaxy that primitive species aren't ready for full membership in the Galactic Council. Keep the power where it's always been." Lisa suddenly sat up straighter. "Wait, I think I found something." Her fingers flew over the holographic controls. "The quantum algorithms they're using to manipulate events, they're incredibly advanced, but they follow patterns. They have to. You can't program chaos." "Can we stop them?" Tom asked. Lisa shook her head, not directly. "Their systems are too sophisticated." "But," a slow smile spread across her face, "we might be able to use their own patterns against them." At that moment, Anne limped into the room, still sore from her accident on the balance beam. "Coach, you should see the message boards. Other smaller species are starting to notice what's happening. They're watching us." Tom looked around at his team. They were tired, sore, and frustrated, but none of them looked beaten. If anything, they looked angry. "Ready." "Lisa," he said, "how long would it take you to map out these patterns? To predict when they'll try to interfere?" "Maybe a day." "Why?" "Because we're going to give them exactly what they expect, right up until we don't." Tom's eyes had that gleam again, the one that had won him so many Earth Olympics. "They think humans are predictable. Simple. That we'll either follow their script or give up." "What's the plan?" Bill asked, straightening up despite his muscle aches. "We're going to be human," Tom replied. "Completely, impossibly, illogically human. And we're going to start with tomorrow's events." As the team huddled around to hear the plan, the station's artificial sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows. In the distance, they could see the Blue Crescent team's luxury quarters glowing with celebration lights. They were probably already celebrating their inevitable victories. They had no idea what was coming. After all, how do you cheat against someone who breaks all the rules of probability? Late that night, while most of Olympus Prime slept, Lisa and Tom moved silently through the station's maintenance tunnels. Lisa's small computer blinked with a map showing the way to the main control center. "Are you sure about this?" Tom whispered, ducking under a low pipe. "If they catch us here." "They won't," Lisa replied, her eyes on the screen. "The maintenance bots are on a fixed schedule. We have exactly 12 minutes before the next patrol." They reached a junction box, and Lisa plugged in her device. Numbers and symbols flowed across her screen. "Just as I thought. The quantum manipulation programs are running through here. They're not even trying to hide them well. They never expected anyone to look." Tom kept watch while Lisa worked. Through a small vent, they could see the Blue Crescent team's private training area below. Their athletes moved with impossible precision, each jump and spin exactly the same as the last. "Look at them," Tom said quietly. "They're not even practicing anymore. They're just running their programs." Lisa's computer beeped softly. "Got it. The whole system. It's beautiful in a way. Horrible, but beautiful. They've mapped out every possible outcome of every event. They can control everything from air resistance to gravity fluctuations. Can they be stopped?" Lisa shook her head, not directly. The system's too big, too complex. But she smiled, the kind of smile that had won her 3 Nobel Prizes before age 30. "They made one huge mistake." "What's that?" "They assumed everything has to make sense." Back in their quarters, Lisa showed the team what she'd found. Her holographic display filled the room with flowing data streams. "Every athlete's performance is calculated in advance," she explained. "The system adjusts things to make sure the predicted winners win. But it can only work if everyone follows basic physics and normal human, or alien, behavior patterns." Bill scratched his head. "So what happens if we don't?" "Chaos," Lisa said happily. "Pure, beautiful chaos." Mary leaned forward. "You mean if we do things that make no logical sense?" "The system can't predict it," Tom finished. "And if it can't predict it, it can't stop it," Lisa confirmed. "But we have to be careful. If we're too obvious, they'll just shut down the events completely. We need to look like we're trying our best to compete normally, right up until the moment we don't." Anne, who had qualified for tomorrow's anti-gravity gymnastics final despite the accidents, raised her hand. "I think I know how we can start. Remember that move I showed you, Coach? The one you said was too risky to ever use." Tom's eyes widened. "The triple inverse. But that's impossible. The human body can't." "Exactly," Anne grinned. "It's completely impossible. No one would ever program a system to account for someone trying it, because no one would ever try it." The team spent the next few hours planning. Each athlete would perform seemingly normal routines, but with subtle, impossible variations. Things that looked like mistakes at first glance, but were actually carefully planned chaos. "Remember," Tom told them as they finally prepared for sleep, "they're expecting us to either follow their rules or give up and go home. They've never dealt with humans who know they're being cheated." Lisa's computer chimed one last alert. "Their system just finalized tomorrow's predicted outcomes. We're all expected to finish last, of course." "Perfect," Tom said. "Let them think they know exactly what's going to happen. Because tomorrow, we start showing the galaxy what humans can really do." As the team dispersed to their rooms, there was a new energy in their steps. They had found their weapon. The unlimited human capacity to do the unexpected, the illogical, the impossible. Tomorrow, they would begin using it. The anti-gravity gymnastics arena was packed. Aliens of all shapes and sizes filled the floating seats, waiting to see the final round. Anne stood at the preparation area, looking calmer than she felt. "Remember," Tom said quietly beside her, "make it look natural until the last moment." Anne nodded. She watched as the Blue Crescent champion performed a perfect routine, each move exactly as predicted. The crowd cheered politely, used to such flawless performances. When Anne's turn came, she stepped onto the anti-gravity platform. The familiar feeling of weightlessness surrounded her. She began her routine normally, following all the expected moves. Lisa's voice came through her hidden earpiece. "Power spike detected. They're about to increase gravity by 3%. Anne smiled. She had been waiting for this. Just as the gravity shifted, she launched into her triple inverse, a move that should have been impossible under normal gravity, let alone increased gravity. The control system, trying to compensate for an unexpected movement, stuttered. For a brief moment, the artificial gravity field rippled across the entire arena. Several audience members gasped as they felt the fluctuation. Anne completed her routine with a series of equally unpredictable moves, each one causing tiny glitches in the system. When she finished, The scoreboard took unusually long to display her results. In the swooning events, Bill was causing similar chaos. Instead of fighting against the water resistance that kept mysteriously increasing, he started swooning in patterns that made no sense, until they suddenly did. The system couldn't predict his movements because even he didn't know what he would do next. "It's working," Lisa reported from their control room, watching the system struggle to cope. "Their quantum algorithms are getting confused. They're trying to adapt, but they can't predict what isn't logical." The effects spread to other events. The human weightlifter deliberately shifted his balance in ways that should have made lifting impossible, but somehow worked. Their runners changed pace randomly, making the gravity adjustments miss their timing. Word spread quickly through the station. Other species began watching the human events with growing interest. They saw the tiny glitches, the moments when the usually perfect control systems seemed to hiccup. "Look at this," Mary said, showing Tom her tablet. "The smaller species are starting to copy us. The Centaurians just won their first medal in centuries by using random movements in their race." Tom watched as more athletes began breaking free from their perfect, predicted patterns. The system was working harder and harder to maintain control, but once athletes started embracing unpredictability, there was no way to stop them. In their luxury box, the Blue Crescent officials were frantically trying to adjust their programs. But how do you program for chaos? How do you predict the unpredictable? "They're getting desperate," Lisa reported, monitoring the power fluctuations. "They're using more energy trying to control the events than ever before." The human team gathered in their quarters that evening, tired but excited. They had won no medals yet, but something bigger was happening. Athletes from other species kept stopping by to ask questions, to learn how to break free from the predictable patterns they'd been forced into. "We're not just competing anymore," Tom told his team. "We're showing them how to be athletes again. Real athletes, not program machines." Anne touched her sore muscles, smiling. "Who knew that being unpredictable would be our greatest strength?" "Humans have always been good at doing the impossible," Mary said. "We just needed the right motivation." Lisa looked up from her computer. "They're scheduled to reset the system tonight. Tomorrow, they'll try to clamp down harder on the variations." "Good," Tom replied, "because tomorrow is the marathon, and wait until they see what we have planned for that." The team shared knowing looks. Tomorrow would be more than just a race. It would be the day everything changed. The day of the marathon arrived with an unusual buzz around Olympus Prime. The station's corridors were packed with spectators from all species, many more than usual for a running event. Word had spread about the strange things happening during human competitions. "They tripled the power to the control systems," Lisa reported from her station. "They're taking no chances today." Tom gathered his team for final instructions. "Remember, we only get one shot at this. If we're wrong about the system's breaking point—" "We're not wrong," Lisa interrupted, her eyes fixed on her displays. "I've calculated everything. We just need to push it past its limits." The marathon course wound through the entire station, using gravity-controlled pathways that curved impossible angles. 50 runners from 30 species lined up at the start, including Bill and 2 other human runners. In the VIP box, the Blue Crescent officials watched nervously. Their usual calm had cracked over the past few days as more and more events produced unexpected results. "On your marks," the automated announcement began. The runners tensed. "Now," Tom whispered into his communicator. As the race began, the human runners did something no one expected. They started at different speeds. Bill sprinted ahead, while the other 2 hung back. The control system, designed to adjust gravity and air resistance based on predicted running patterns, tried to compensate. "They're trying to correct the variations," Lisa reported, "just like we wanted." Throughout the station, viewers watched on floating screens as the race unfolded. The Blue Crescent runner led, moving with mechanical precision, but the humans kept changing pace randomly, forcing the system to make constant adjustments. Halfway through the race, other runners began copying the human strategy. The system struggled to handle dozens of athletes, all moving unpredictably. Power consumption is at 95% of maximum, Lisa announced. Almost there. In the control room, Blue Crescent technicians worked frantically to maintain control. Warning lights flashed as the quantum algorithms tried to process too many variables at once. Tom's voice came through the team's earpieces. Final phase. Do it now. Bill and the other human runners suddenly switched to running backwards, then sideways, then in zigzag patterns. Other runners followed suit, each adding their own bizarre variations. The system crashed. For a moment, every gravity field in the station flickered. The carefully maintained atmospheres in each section wavered. And most importantly, every screen in the station switched to showing the system's control interface, revealing the complex cheating programs for all to see. By the Galactic Council, a nearby alien gasped. They'd been controlling everything. The Blue Crescent officials jumped to their feet, but it was too late. Billions of viewers across the galaxy had seen the truth. Their perfect system, exposed for what it really was, an elaborate cheating scheme. The race dissolved into chaos, the good kind of chaos. Without the control system, athletes began running naturally for the first time in centuries. Some were faster, some slower, but all of them were finally competing fairly. Bill crossed the finish line third, a true third place, earned without any interference. The crowd's reaction was unlike anything ever heard in the station. They weren't cheering for the winner. They were cheering for the return of real competition. "We did it," Lisa whispered, looking at her screens. "The whole system is dead. They can't restore it without admitting what it was for." Tom watched as athletes from various species surrounded the human team, asking questions, sharing stories of how they'd suspected something was wrong, but never could prove it. "So we didn't win the marathon," Mary said, joining him. "No," Tom smiled, watching the celebration spread through the station. "We won something much better." The final day of the Galactic Olympics looked nothing like its opening. The gleaming perfection of Olympus Prime had given way to something far more interesting: reality. Athletes from all species gathered in the main arena. But this time, there were no quantum controls, no hidden systems, just pure competition. Tom stood with his team as the Galactic Council made their emergency announcement. The huge holographic display showed council members from 100 worlds, all looking rather uncomfortable. In light of recent events, the council had announced, all previous Olympic records are hereby voided. The games will be restructured, with new rules focusing on natural ability and fair play. A cheer went up from the gathered athletes. The Blue Crescent delegation sat in silence, their perfect record now meaningless. Furthermore, the council continued, "We wish to recognize the Earth team, not for their medals, of which they won few, but for their service to galactic sport. They have reminded us of something we had forgotten." Lisa, standing next to Tom, looked up from her tablet. "They're dismantling the control systems, all of them. Not just in sports, they're checking everything now." Mary smiled. Turns out humans aren't the only ones who were tired of being controlled. The council head approached the human team personally, carrying the strange crystal trophy. "This is the Star of Innovation," he explained. "It has never been awarded before. It recognizes those who make us question our assumptions and push us to be better." As Tom accepted the trophy, athletes from dozens of worlds approached the human team. A young Centaurian runner spoke first. "Will you teach us? Not just about running, but about being unpredictable." "About being ourselves," added another athlete. Tom looked at his team, seeing the pride in their faces. "That's what humans do best," he said. "We adapt, we change, we try crazy things just to see if they'll work, and we'd be honored to share that with anyone who wants to learn." The next few hours turned into an impromptu celebration. Athletes from different species demonstrated their natural abilities. No enhancements, no controls, just pure talent and determination. It was messy, imperfect, and absolutely beautiful. "Look at that," Bill said, watching a group of mixed species trying to learn Earth dance moves. "We came here thinking we had to prove we were as good as them. Instead, we proved being different was better than being perfect," and finished. In their former luxury box, the Blue Crescent officials were meeting with council investigators. Their carefully built system of control was crumbling, not just in sports, but in every aspect of galactic society they had influenced. Lisa joined Tom at the observation window, watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. "More teams are coming," she said. "Smaller species that were afraid to compete before. They're calling for a complete restart of the games. Real games this time." "Think we'll win any medals in the new Olympics?" Mary asked. Tom watched as a group of alien athletes tried to copy Anne's impossible gymnastics move, failing but laughing as they did. "I think we've already won something better than medals. We've won respect, not for being the strongest or fastest, but for being the most human," Mary finished. As the Earth team prepared to head home, they left behind more than just exposed cheating systems and voided records. They left a legacy of change, a reminder that sometimes the best way to win isn't to play by the rules. It's to prove the rules need changing. The next Galactic Olympics would be different. They would be real. And humanity had earned its place not just as competitors, but as teachers, showing the galaxy that imperfection, unpredictability, and the sheer joy of true competition were worth more than any perfect score.